All right, just let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you for the introduction. And my name is Heng. I'm currently at Purdue and we're graduating soon. And the ECE department and the Saurabh Bagchi is my advisor. So in this work, we basically did the analysis of some Bluetooth traces. So we collect some Bluetooth trace from campus students, and we also use a public available Bluetooth trace. And essentially, we're trying to identify if there is any privacy leakage in the Bluetooth trace, and the more details are coming. So here is a basic outline. I will first give a simple introduction to our methodology and what are our key findings, and I will talk about the adversary models in our work. And then I will talk about the data set we collected as well as the one public data set we used and our experimental setup and present some preliminary results to share to the community. So a quick introduction. So as we have known that the mobile devices, they are pretty much every modern mobile device capable of Bluetooth low energy communication, like your smartphones, your tablets, your wearable devices. So most of the time, these devices, their BLE functionality is open, although the user may not be aware of or do not care too much, since that's convenient to keep it open, and the energy consumption is not very significant, so it's more almost like negligible for the energy consumption. And in fact, those devices are periodically kind of scanning nearby BLE signals as well as advertise its existence. This kind of design choice is intended to have some convenience for the users, like automatic connection with other BLE devices, like your music player or your cars. When you go into a car, you'll notice that once you start a car, the smartphone automatically connects with the car. So this all enabled by like keeping the BLE function on your mobile device operating all the time. And the issue is, given this design choice, can the user privacy being compromised using the neighboring BL signals, and can a adversary profile user simply given the trace of the neighboring BLE advertisement? So those are the two questions we are trying to understand in this work. So for our study, we perform IRB-approved user study. We recruit 50 students at Purdue University. Some of them are undergrad and some of them are graduate students. And we run for 2 weeks. During this period, all the user install an Android application that we developed. And this Android application continuously scan their neighboring BLE advertisement to collect the data. And the data is uploaded to the cloud server that we are managing. So our Bluetooth trace is open sourced. Feel free to use the link in the paper. And our motivation to run such kind of user study is the following. The first one is like, we noticed that the Bluetooth low energy permission management of the Android device is actually quite trivial. So since Android 6, the BLE related permissions are pretty much granted at the install time. The users, when they install app, if they do not look very carefully of the description of the app, they are not aware of what a permission are used, and they don't actually know that some of the apps are able to do some BLE operations. And second motivation is that the BLE advertisement is very trivial and easy to understand. Actually, as you may have some experience. When you open your car, for example, you see a signal like Ford Sync, you know definitely that's a Ford car. And the third motivation is that the neighboring BLE count. So basically so when you open your phone, open your BLE page, you will notice that there are a lot of devices around you. There are a lot of different BLE signals around you. And actually the number of neighboring BLE counts may be related or coherent to your daily schedule. Think of a very simple scenario. When you wake up, you go to work, actually in your workplace, the neighboring BLE signal is pretty much stable. It's related to how many BLE devices in your workspace, as well as how many colleagues or people around you. And this is pretty much consistent with your schedule. So basically using the BLE count, can we trace the user? Can we do some identification of the user? That's some question we're trying to understand. So before I go to the methodology, I will just throw out some of the key findings we found in this paper. The first one is that the temporal pattern of the neighboring BLE count for each user is in fact distinguishable, and we will show a plot of that. And given this, an adversary can actually utilize this temporal pattern of a BLE count to identify a user with a pretty much high degree of confidence. A second finding is that the BLE advertisement is easy to read, can actually review a user's products, and this leakage can lead to some inference of the usage preference of the user, and they'll even send some targeted promotions. A simple example is that, for example, if we have a timestamp trees or BLE signals, and we notice that pretty much every night at 8 p.m. we will see a both speaker signal in the trees, then we know pretty much the user maybe a music fan or maybe like very interested in both products. So that's some information we can directly read from the advertisement and based on trace to understand the user. And third finding is that the privacy leakage, specifically the location privacy leakage, can be escalated with some cross-validation of BLE traces. So in our user study, we actually found out that 5 users at some time, out of the 5 users of their traces, we found that one of the BLE advertisement is common for them at a similar time. And since we in our user study, we also collected their location, we are able to validate our hypothesis that those users, although maybe they do not want to share their location, but because they come across the same BLE advertisement, we can infer that they are pretty much close together. And suppose one of the users' location is compromised, then the rest will be compromised as well. So given those findings and introduction, I'm going to talk about what the adversary can do. So by hypothesis, we assume that the adversary is someone who can acquire the BLE scan trees. So how to get that depends. They can buy such data set, or they can basically publish an app and the users download it to masquerade like this app is a useful tool, for example, your hiking tool or your workout app, those things to presume to be useful, but actually perform some BLE collection in the background. And the goal for the adversary is basically to profile the user, given the BLE usage and BLE traces and whatever the neighboring devices of the user, and probably in a more escalated level to infer the location of the user, even though the user may not want to share that information. This information can be used for like marketing processes, purpose, or like tracking the user movement as well. So given that said, I'm going to talk about how we collect the data set and how our experiment is executed. So as I mentioned before, we have 2 types of data set. One is the user study data set, which we already published in our GitHub repo, and you can find the link in our paper. And this data set we collect with Android app, and this app is pretty simple. It just scans nearby a BLE advertisement every minute and upload it. And the information included for each scan is like MAC address of BLE signal, what the advertising name of the neighbor BLE device, and the signal strings as well as timestamp, and the location of the user, latitude and longitude. For the external data set, oh, by the way, the user study data, we have 50 users. For the external data set, we found that in a website, in your public website, the link is also in the paper, and they have 25 employees at shopping mall over 6 days. 5 employees just scan the neighbor BLE signals. That includes the MAC address of the BLE device as well as the timestamp. So results, some results we're going to show, and pretty much I think they're very interesting. So before I go to the very detailed results, I'm going to introduce some smoothing techniques we use in this paper. So the reason we do the smoothing is that the BLE signals may have some noises. Think about the scenario where you regularly go to work, but sometime maybe once a year you go to hospital. And in such scenarios, the hospital BLE signal may be noisy, and that one we cannot predict, and we do not want to take that into account in the trend of the user. So we apply some smoothing technique to kind of eliminate those noises. So if you look at the figure here, the first row figure is original time raw data of the BLE signals from 2 users. And second, the third and fourth rows are some techniques we apply to smooth the data. Specifically, we apply like lows 50% smoothing, lows 15% smoothing, as well as moving average. The value in the low smoothing technique, you can think of like the higher the number, like 5% to the 50%, the higher degree of or you can say that it's more aggressive to smooth the data. And eventually we found that using the 5% smoothing of lows, it provides a balance between like representing the pattern with user as well as eliminating those transient spikes in the data in the original raw data. So we apply the smoothing technique, and the following results will be based on this smooth the data set. So first one is the uniqueness of the BLE traces. So if you look at here, figure 2 and figure 5, figure 2 is for 25 students in our campus dataset. We do not show the 51 because that will be much messier and hard to read. And if the right one is 25 employees in the external dataset. Pretty much we can identify that for the 25 students, because they have different schedules, they travel at different places, there is no coherent patterns in such a campus data set. But that's and given that we can profile each user, and given this profile we can identify each user, because given a trace, you don't know which this user belong to, because you don't know others pattern. They are pretty much unique. And for the external data set, because the 25 employees, they reside in the same square, and therefore the population will be like relatively similar, but the variance among different users simply because different store has different popularity, therefore different number of people will go to those stores. So that's for the uniqueness of the BLE trace. And for the forecastability, essentially our goal is to build a framework given some history trace of the BLE count, and we're trying to predict the future BLE count, let's say the next minute, next 2 minutes, next 5 minutes. And we build a very simple LSTM model, which runs very fast, just the 4 neurons in the LSTM layer. And we measure the performance of prediction using routine mean square as well as sample entropy. So the routine mean square is essentially measure the predicted results as well as observed results and try to find the difference. And the sample entropy is a technique or a metric to measure if the time series pattern has certain regularity. For both of those metrics, the lower the value, the better the results. So here we compare the raw data as well as the smooth data. For the raw data and smooth data in the plots, we just show the campus data set. We choose 5 users to show here. And if you look at the top row, the first row, it shows 5 users with the raw data. And although we can see that the green value or green dot are the predicted results, and the red dot are the observed results, the ground truth. Although we can say that for the raw data, our prediction model can pretty much preserve the same pattern as the raw data, but still there are certain variance at each data point. But for the smoothed version, in the smoothed version, we can still represent the pattern with the user, but our prediction accuracy is much higher. If we look at the RMSE for the smoothed data set, the results is the predicted value is pretty much aligned with the observed value. And another measurement is the sample entropy. So the left one is the 25 using our in our campus data, and the right figure is the 25 employees in the shopping mall data set. So in each of the plot, we show the sample entropy for the raw as well as the smooth data. And we also show the routine mean square for the raw and the smooth data. So essentially, for both the entropy and the routine mean square, regardless of what data set we're talking about, their value goes down with the smooth data. And for the raw data, the sample entropy, for example, here, if you look at here, although it's kind of high, but still it's pretty low to be useful to do the prediction, and which indicates that using the Bluetooth count trace, user can be identified or can be used to predict like what what's the number of a BLE count in the future, which indicates that the Bluetooth count as a trace is a way to identify a user or to predict the user's schedule, somehow like that. So in summary, we identified the following things. The user neighboring BLE trace can be a vulnerability point for the adversary to deploy it. And each user has a unique trace pattern because user has different schedules. And the data smoothing techniques will make the prediction easier to do. And in our experiment, we identify users that they may come across the same BLE signal. And this can indicate that although maybe some of the users they have some close relation. And if one of the users' location is compromised, the others will be compromised as well, although they do not want to share their location. So the BLE privacy leakage is a real issue. Simply based on the BLE neighboring BLE count, we can do such things. And we recommend some fixes like injecting some fake and random advertisement to obfuscate the advertising scanning results. So what does this mean is like when the mobile device rendering the neighboring BLE signals to the user, instead of just showing the correct or the real device around user, randomly and given certain distribution, give other advertising which are fake, not exist. But this technique will not affect the regular usage of the user, but protect the user from such kind of attack. So yeah, that's pretty much for this paper. And I'm happy to accept any questions you may have. Thank you.